Hi everyone, Brian from the Retro Sons. As you can see from the title, today I'll be discussing First Blood. I'll be going over the differences between the movie and the book. Rambo's a well-known character, and a lot of you have probably seen at least one of the movies, but less well known is that in 1972, a full 10 years before he ever showed up on the big screen, he was just a character in a book written by David Morrell. I like both versions of this, and some things are done better in the book and some are done better in the movie. So I'm just going to go through and list off the changes that were made. I hope you don't mind if I refer to my notes. It's a long road, but I hope you'll stick around to the end. The first real change is the setting. In the book, it was in Kentucky in early October. The movie takes place in Washington sometime in December. Now, it's a small change, so it doesn't really make any difference. In both the book and the movie, Rambo's a Vietnam vet who spent some time as a prisoner of war. In the book, he's been home for 6 months and he's been to 15 different towns, kicked out of each one by the law because of his appearance. He has long hair and a beard, and they think he's up to no good. He trusts no one, and he's sick of being pushed around. In the movie, he's looking for an old war friend who he soon discovers died from cancer. He seems a bit more cooperative in the movie, and he tells Teasel that he's not looking for trouble and asks why he's pushing him. Teasel in the book is a Korean War veteran who is going through a divorce and came from a big city some while ago to be the chief of the small town Madison in Kentucky. In the movie, he has no real backstory and he's just kind of a jerk. He seems friendly to people in town, but then he's seen making comments about him behind their back. He sees Rambo and he gives him a ride out of town, acting friendly at first, but then saying that based on his appearance, he's not really going to be too popular anywhere. He warns him about coming back. Colonel Troutman in the book is not too well known to Rambo. He just ran the school where Rambo was trained, but in the movie, he personally trained Rambo. He recruited him and he commanded him for 3 years in the war. Their relationship in the movie is a lot closer. Right at the very beginning of the book, Teasel picks Rambo up at a gas station and brings him out of town. He tells him not to come back, but Rambo does anyway. He goes to a diner to order a burger and a Coke, and Teasel comes in and takes him away again, leaving him on the outside of town, where he watches Rambo as he drives away. Rambo sits down and eats his meal and then burns the garbage to leave no trail, a habit he picked up in the war. Then he makes his way back into town where Teasel's waiting for him, but he sneaks in and Teasel doesn't see him come back. Teasel thinks he's gone for good and he starts driving and notices Rambo and he slams on the brakes, causing the car behind him to rear end him. He goes and tells Rambo to stay put and then he goes to deal with the accident. Rambo takes off and then he's apprehended on a bridge where Teasel arrests him. In the movie, Teasel just gives him one ride out of town and then Rambo just turns around and starts walking right back in. And then Teasel arrests him right then and there. Also, in the book, the people at the police station are a lot nicer to Rambo. They make some rude comments, but they don't really interact with him. Teasel himself processes Rambo and prepares him for a shower and prepares to give him a haircut and shave him. This causes a flashback to his time as a prisoner of war, and he freaks out, takes the razor and cuts Galt's stomach open, killing him. He escapes onto the street naked, steals a motorcycle, and makes his way into the hills in the forest. In the movie, Teasel hands Rambo off to Galt, who's mean to him and he insults him and threatens him several times. They find Rambo's dog tags and learn that he's a veteran and that his name is John Rambo. In the book at this point, they never know his name. Galt orders Rambo to strip and then hits him with a baton and kicks him while he's down. The cops spray him with a big hose and then he gets dressed and they prepare to shave him. This triggers a flashback to his time as a prisoner of war and he escapes, beating up several of the cops but killing no one. He takes his knife back and he escapes onto the street wearing jeans and a tank top and shoes. He steals a motorcycle and makes his way into the hills, much like in the book. In the book, when Rambo gets away, Teasel calls the state police, and then he calls an old friend, Orville, who was a friend of his father's and raised Teasel after his father died. Orville has dogs that can track Rambo. In the movie, after Rambo escapes, Teasel tells people to call Orville and bring his dogs. No backstory is given between Orville and Teasel. Orville shows up with his dogs, and he argues with Teasel about going in after Rambo as it's getting dark and he doesn't want to risk anything happening to his dogs. Teasel argues that they have to go right away and they can camp as soon as it gets dark. He just doesn't want the state police taking over. It's his chase and he doesn't want to give it up. In the movie, they follow right away and they catch up to Rambo quickly. Orville doesn't really have much to say. He seems more like a goofy character in the movie. There's no relationship between him and Teasel, as I've said before. In the book, Rambo finds a stream and follows it, thinking there might be a still at the end. He runs into an old man and his son, and he convinces them to help him out or he'll lead the police to the still. The old man orders his son to go and get supplies for Rambo. He soon comes back with clothes and some food, and the old man gives Rambo his rifle. In the movie, Rambo just stumbles across an old shack and an abandoned truck. He finds some rope and a canvas tarp and he makes himself a poncho. Rambo eventually makes his way to a cliff and starts climbing down as he hears the posse close behind him. The helicopter shows up and the passenger starts shooting at Rambo. He jumps into the tree and shoots back, hitting the passenger and panicking the pilot, who crashes. Rambo jumps the rest of the way out of the tree and ends up with broken ribs. He spots the posse at the top of the cliff and fires rounds at them, hitting the dogs, one of which falls off the cliff, pulling the deputy with him. The posse argues and Orville is shot in the back, but still alive. It starts raining and Teasel decides to take Orville to safety. Him and several deputies start carrying Orville, but the rain's getting heavier and it starts flooding, and they lose their grip and Orville goes over the edge. Rambo comes across the bodies and takes a pistol from the policeman and a hunting knife from Orville. He soon starts killing off the deputies one by one, leaving only Teasel alive, who crawls back to town and escapes. In the movie, he climbs down the cliff and jumps off into the tree as Galt starts shooting at him from the helicopter. He gets to the ground with hurt ribs and a big cut on his arm, and he throws a rock at the helicopter, panicking the pilot, who, in his fear, knocks Galt out of the helicopter. Well, it was hard to get out. Rambo takes the rifle from Galt's body and then sews up his arm, and he comes out and tries to surrender to the police, saying he doesn't want anyone else to get hurt. They shoot at him, and then he goes off, and they argue about going after him. The state police call and tell him that he was a Green Beret, and it was a mistake to start trouble with him. They argue about going after him, and Will says they have to, because of what he did to Galt. It cuts to Rambo making traps, and then the deputies and Teasel are going after him. And they see a scarecrow set up by Rambo and start shooting at it. Orville lets go of the dogs and they are shot by Rambo. And then Orville is shot in the leg. He releases the last dog and it's killed. And Teasel says that Rambo's out of ammo because the last thing that killed the dog wasn't a gun. Rambo uses handmade camouflage and guerrilla tactics to take out the deputies non-lethally one by one until only Teasel is left. And then he tells him, "In town you're the law, out here it's me. Let it go or I'll give you a war you won't believe." Following Teasel's escape in the book, he is tended to by a doctor, and then he's sitting in the back of an army truck looking at a map, planning his next move against Rambo. The National Guard is called in, and they're mobilized, and there are civilians out looking for Rambo, but they just keep shooting each other, so they're soon called back in. Colonel Troutman shows up and says all he knows about Rambo. He's willing to help catch him. As all this is happening, Rambo wakes up in a cave, having blacked out from the pain in his broken ribs. He doesn't remember how he gets to the cave, but he soon explores it and realizes that it's an old abandoned mine. He's coming down with a fever, so he decides to rest for a while. He collects some items for a fire and a makeshift bed. After a rest, he decides to get some food, and he remembers seeing an old owl. He hears gunshots, so he feels like if he shoots, it won't give away his position. He kills the owl and cooks it and eats it. After being fed and rested, Rambo goes back to the stream and hides in the mud, knowing that the National Guard is looking for him. One of the National Guardsmen stands right on top of Rambo, hurting his ribs, and he fears that he'll run out of breath, but then they move on, and he cleans the mud off himself. He's soon met by two civilians who he quickly kills. He goes back to his mine, and the National Guard spots him and shoots at him. Then he collapses the roof of the mine, and they think he's dead, but then he calls out that he wants to talk to Teasel. They tell him that Teasel can't come and tell him to surrender. He starts handing out his guns, but then he feels a breeze and knows that there's another way out. Changes his mind. In the movie, after Teasel escapes, he's mostly okay and he's patched up in a tent. Troutman shows up for no reason and says that he's there for his boy. He says that he trained Rambo, recruited him, and commanded him for 3 years in the war. And that makes him his boy. They have a much closer relationship than in the book. He tells him that it's a mistake to go after Rambo, and he's surprised that Rambo let any of them live. He says that he can hold out for as long as he needs to, because he's been taught to ignore pain and things like the weather, and he's been taught to eat things that would make a billy goat puke. He also tells Will, "I didn't come here to save him from you, I came here to save you from him." He seems a lot less willing to help in the movie. Also in the movie, Rambo kills a boar for food and goes back to the mine shaft. The cops attempt to contact Rambo on a stolen police radio that he has. He doesn't answer any of them, and Troutman tells Teasel that it's best to just let him go to defuse the situation. In a few months, he'll be picked up peacefully working at a car wash. Teasel doesn't want to let him go, and he tells Troutman to try talking to him. Troutman gets on the radio and lists all the old members of Rambo's unit. He responds by telling him that they're all dead. Troutman says that the person Rambo is looking for at the beginning isn't dead, and Rambo informs him that he is. Says he died in Vietnam and just didn't know it. They talk about the current situation, and Rambo insists that they drew first blood, and he ends transmission. The cops are able to get Rambo's location from this, and they send the National Guard out to get him. He hides in the stream, and then he comes across some hunters who he lets live, but they give away his position. The National Guard chases him back to the mine, shooting at him, and he shoots back. They tell him to surrender or they'll shoot. He doesn't surrender, so they fire at him with a rocket launcher, collapsing the entrance to the mine. They believe he's dead. Teasel shows up and yells at them, saying he wanted Rambo alive. Troutman is also there, and he sees another way out, and he knows that Rambo isn't dead, but he doesn't say anything. In the book, Rambo goes further into the mine and finds a way to climb down. He squeezes through, hurting his ribs some more, and he finds an old skeleton. Then he moves on, and he follows the sound of water. He gets to a stream, and then he finds a tunnel which he crawls through, ending up in a bat cave. He's bitten by several bugs in the bat droppings, and he goes back to the stream and falls asleep for a while. When he wakes up, he decides that he has no choice but to go out through the bat cave, so he crawls through again, wading through the droppings, and the bats start to swarm, and they lead him out into the fresh air. Teasel wakes up in his office, having blacked out from taking too many pills and being exhausted. His wife calls and they talk for a while, and then he hears an explosion and hears news that Rambo has made his way back into town in a stolen police car. Rambo sets fire to the gas station and then drives some more. Troutman comes over the radio and tells him to give himself up, If he believed that Rambo could get away, he would tell him to keep going, but he thinks there's no way out. Teasel makes his way outside and shoots at Rambo, causing him to crash. Rambo gets away and hides beside a porch and watches Teasel look for him. He takes aim and is about to shoot, but a woman on the porch spots him and screams, alerting Teasel. He's out of ammo with his rifle, so he leaves it. Rambo and Teasel stalk each other, and Teasel manages to outthink Rambo, sneaking up on him and taking him by surprise. They shoot at each other, hitting each other. Teasel is hit in the stomach, and Rambo is shot in the chest. Rambo escapes through a playground and into some brambles. Teasel is lying on the ground, amazed that he's not more hurt from the wound, only itchy. An old woman comes and offers him help, but he refuses. And then Troutman shows up with a shotgun and says he's going after Rambo. Teasel insists on going with, and Troutman crawls away stealthily. Teasel manages to get to his feet and stumbles after. Rambo comes across a shed and considers going in, but he says it's too much like where he was confined during his time as a prisoner of war, so he decides to stay outside under the stars. He feels himself going numb, and he feels fear of what will happen to his body after he dies, so he decides to go out on his own terms with a stick of dynamite, blowing himself up. But before he can, he sees Teasel coming and takes aim and shoots, feeling bad for shooting Teasel again. And then he's just described as having a peaceful feeling and floating out through the back of his head. Cuts back to Teasel lying on the ground, not having felt the shot hit him in the chest. He hears someone coming, thinking it's the kid, as he still refers to Rambo. Troutman shows up and ejects his empty shell, saying that he shot Rambo in the head, and he feels better knowing he's not in pain anymore. Teasel thinks about his wife and his home, and none of it seems important to him, and he thinks one last time about Rambo and feels love for him, and then dies. And that's how the book ends. And in the movie, Rambo goes deeper into the cave, and he's attacked by rats, and then he makes his way outside and sees the National Guardsmen still looking for him, and he avoids them. Then it cuts to Teasel meeting Troutman in a bar, and they talk amiably enough, and Teasel asks Troutman how he would react if Rambo had given himself in. Troutman says he doesn't know, he would have had to see if the time came. Then it shows back to Rambo, and he sees a convoy of army trucks. He steals the last one and finds out that there's an M60 machine gun in the back. He throws the driver out and steals the truck. The driver is soon picked up by cops, who he alerts of Rambo's survival. The cops give chase, and Rambo forces them into another oncoming police car, causing an explosion. He then crashes through a roadblock back into town, drives over some gas pumps, takes the M60 out of the back of the truck, and lights the gas on fire, blowing up the gas station and the truck. Teasel uses the loudspeakers to alert the townspeople to get inside and stay there. Then he grabs a rifle and some ammo and plans to go after Rambo himself. Troutman shows up again and admits that he suspected that Rambo wasn't dead. He offers his help, which Teasel refuses. Rambo shoots out the electrical boxes, causing a power outage in that part of town, and then he goes into the sporting goods store, pouring out black powder and lighting it up, burning down the store. He sees Teasel peeking off the roof of the police station, and then he goes inside the police station. Teasel spots him and shoots at him, but misses. He fires back, hitting Teasel, causing him to fall through the skylight. He's about to finish Teasel off, and he's telling him to do it, and then Troutman shows up and tells him not to. He tells him it's over. Rambo insists nothing is over. You don't just turn it off. And then he tells about his experiences since getting back from the war. Tells about how people spit on him and yelled at him. And then he goes into a speech about witnessing one of his friends blown up in the war, and tells about how they were planning to get a car and cruise around when they got back from the war. At the end, he surrenders to Troutman, and he's arrested, and Teasle is shown being taken away in an ambulance, still alive. And that is how the movie ends. Personally, I like the movie better, but there are some parts that are done better in the book. I like the ending of the book better, with Rambo ending up dead, but Hollywood didn't want it that way. I hear that Sylvester Stallone insisted on keeping Rambo alive, and then they decided to go on and make more movies, which I think aren't as good as the first, because just shows like how he's a normal person dealing with being back from the war, and this seems like something that could happen. And then he goes on to be like an unstoppable superhero. So I think in the movie they should have left it in where he dies. There is an alternate ending where Troutman shoots him in the chest and he dies, and I think they should have left that version in. Anyway, tell me what you think about the movie. Have you read the book? Just let me know all your thoughts on Rambo and anything like that. Is there anything I missed? Just let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe. Thank you.